The summer of 1876 had laid heavy hands on the town of Mercy Hill, the kind of weight that seeped into a man's bones and turned a breeze into a prayer. Heat shimmered off the hard-packed earth, warping the horizon like a whiskey dream. Folks moved slow, talked slower, and kept to shadows where they could find him. Even the crows sat still on fence posts, wings splayed and beaks open, waiting for the sky to crack open and let loose some mercy. That day, the town had two new visitors, and neither came looking for rest. One rode in from the north, a long trail of dust curling behind him like a snake's tail. Silas Cade, leather-tanned, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a past that clung to him like dry blood. He sat tall in the saddle, back straight, boots worn from too many miles and too little peace. Folks watched from porches and behind curtains as he passed, a man whose presence whispered gunpowder and unfinished business. From the east came the other, Cashin Drake, dandy by some standards, but don't let the fine-cut coat and polished spurs fool you. He wore his pistol like an extension of his arm, and his mouth had a way of talking his way into and out of more trouble than most men could imagine. He had a gambler's grin, a soldier's scars, and charm sharp as a snake's tooth. They didn't speak when they passed one another by the old town well, didn't tip their hats or nod like decent men. Just looked. 1 second, maybe 2, but that's all it took for every soul in Mercy Hill to feel the crackle in the air, like lightning had brushed the edge of the prairie and kept going. The center of all that thunder? Her name was Esmé Delaroa. She worked at the livery, of all places. Not the saloon like you'd expect from the way folks talked. She could fix a busted axle faster than most men could spit, and she had a way with horses that made em calm just by the sound of her voice. Skin like warm honey, eyes that saw more than they ever said, and a walk that made men forget their manners. But it wasn't just her beauty that drew folks in. It was the mystery. She didn't belong to anyone, didn't talk much about where she came from, and she sure as shootin' didn't care what any man thought he could claim. Silas had met her once, brief, last summer, helped her ride a spook mare out near Cotton Ridge, said no more than 20 words between them, but he hadn't stopped thinking on her since. Cashin met her 2 days prior, helping her haul sacks of oats from a broken wagon wheel. She'd laughed at one of his stories, and he'd sworn to himself that laugh was worth every mile he'd ridden. And so now, here they stood, not 10 paces apart in the blistering sun, both of them staring at the same porch where Esmé was sitting, her boots up on the rail, sharpening a knife like she didn't have a care in the world. "You here for what I think you are?" Silas asked, his voice low and even. Cashin didn't flinch. "Ain't it obvious?" "She don't belong to neither of us," Silas said, more warning than words. Cashin smiled. "Then I suppose we'll let her decide." But what neither of them knew, not then, not under that punishing sun, and not with their pride flaring hotter than the heat off a skillet, was that Esmé Delaroa had secrets so deep, even she hadn't yet looked at all of them, and what she was about to reveal would turn both their hearts into kindling. Esmé Delaroa didn't flinch when Silas Cade and Cashin Drake squared up in front of her porch. She kept sharpening that knife, slow, smooth strokes, like the steel could hear what the men couldn't say aloud. The town of Mercy Hill had seen gunfights, sure. Old grudges, poker debts, whiskey-soaked brawls. But this was different. This was a quiet tension, coiled and patient, like a rattler under the floorboards. Esmé looked up at him at last, her voice even as the edge of that blade. "You two planning on standing there till sundown? Or are you going to speak plain?" Silas stepped forward, removing his hat like he was entering church. "I came for you, Esmé. Thought maybe I'd take you out past Red Mesa. There's wildflowers growing along the creek bed. Could use your company." Cashin laughed soft, easy. "You come to court a woman with flowers, Silas? Thought you were a cattleman, not a poet." Esmé arched a brow. "And what did you come with, Cashin?" "A card trick." He grinned, tapping the deck in his vest pocket. "Maybe I brought 1 or 2. Or maybe I just wanted to see if your eyes still spark when you get riled." Her mouth quirked, not quite a smile. "You two think this is about choice. Like I'm a prize and you're racing to the finish line." Silas frowned. "Ain't like that." "Isn't it?" she asked, standing now, knife still in hand. You've both been watching me like hawks on a fence post. But neither of you asked why I keep to myself. Why I sleep with a pistol under the pillow. Cashin's grin faded. We all got pasts. Some of us more than others, she said, walking past him down the steps. And some of us are trying not to let the past catch up. The truth was, Esmé had run before. From Louisiana, from a man with power and too many secrets. Her real name wasn't even Delaroa. It was carved on a headstone in Baton Rouge, where her family was buried after a fire no one investigated proper. She'd taken the name from her mother's side, and the strength from her father's pistol. That pistol was tucked inside her boot now. Silas watched her go, jaw clenched. Cashin touched the brim of his hat, thoughtful. She's running from something, Silas muttered. She ain't running, Cashin replied, his voice quieter than usual. She's waiting for it to catch up. That night, the stars burned hot above the desert, the moon a sharp crescent over Mercy Hill. And far out in the scrub, 3 riders moved like shadows, wearing dust and bad intentions. One of them held a crumpled flyer with Esmé's face sketched in charcoal, a bounty posted months back by a name she'd prayed never to hear again. Cashin and Silas might have come courting, but before long, they'd be fighting, not just for her heart, but for her life. The morning came on hot and thick, the kind of air that made sweat bead before a man could even button his shirt. Silas was out by the edge of town, tending his horse, his jaw tight, and thoughts darker than the coffee in the saloon. He'd felt danger before, could sniff it like burnt toast on the wind. And right now, the breeze carried something mean. Cashin was seated in Mercy Hill's only cafe, picking at a plate of beans and dry bread. He kept glancing at the swinging doors, fingers tapping the table in rhythm. He'd seen the bounty poster first, spotted it nailed behind a trader's wagon 2 towns back. He hadn't said nothing yet, didn't know how. But Esmé's face had been there, and above it, bold as a church sermon, was the name Esmé Bellamy. Dead woman's name. Beneath the sketch, wanted for arson, theft, and murder in Orleans Parish. $500 reward alive. Cashin had ripped it down and folded it in his coat, heart pounding. He didn't know what was true, but he knew what wasn't. Esmé Delaroa didn't kill no man without cause. Meanwhile, Esmé was out past the livery, brushing down a mare named Clover. The heat didn't seem to touch her, not when her mind was full. She'd seen a shadow near the outskirts last night. Someone watching. She'd seen it before, in New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas. Always the same. Quiet, watchful. Always just before the trouble arrived. She reached for her saddlebag and pulled out the Colt .36 she hadn't touched in months. Wiped the dust from the barrel. Loaded it slow. Her hands were steady. They always were, even when her heart wasn't. You leaving? Came a voice behind her. She didn't turn. No, Silas. But I might have to shoot somebody before supper. He stepped closer. You want to tell me who's following you? She paused. You sure you want to know? I wouldn't ask otherwise. So she told him, just the edges of the story. A man named Lambert. Rich, ruthless, used to getting what he wanted. Her family had worked his land, suffered under his thumb. Her brother tried to fight back. He wound up hanging from a tree out back of the parish church. She lit the fire that night, took the deed papers from Lambert's office, the ring he tried to force on her finger, and the pistol she still carried. She didn't wait around to see the flames take root. Town said I killed a good man, she said, voice like iron. But good men don't chain women to kitchens and bury boys for speaking out. Silas didn't flinch. No, they don't. She finally turned to face him. There's a bounty. Been following me like a curse. I figured, Silas said. But that ain't what matters. Then what does? That you trust me enough to tell me. Just then, Cashin stepped from behind the corner, holding that bounty poster like it was dipped in guilt. I saw it too, he said. I didn't come to claim it. I came to warn you. Esmé's eyes met his. Why? Cashin shrugged. Because I don't like watching good folks hunted. That was when the first shot cracked through the livery roof, splintering wood and throwing silence into chaos. 3 men on horseback burst through the brush, rifles drawn, faces half covered. "Esmé Bellamy," one bellowed. "Come quiet, or we bring the whole town down." Cashin's pistol was out in a flash. Silas ducked behind the water trough, drawing his own. Esmé didn't hide. She stepped forward, gun in hand, and yelled, "You boys picked the wrong day to play bounty hunter." Then she fired the first shot. The first shot Esmé fired hit the lead rider's shoulder, knocking him clean off his horse like a scarecrow in a windstorm. The other two spurred their mounts and split, circling, wide like coyotes looking for an opening. Cashin dropped to one knee, squeezed a shot off that clipped a saddle horn, sending sparks flying. Silas, cool as shade, took out the rear stirrup on one horse, sending the rider tumbling in a cloud of dust. The livery yard was full of shouts, gunpowder, and the sharp smell of sweat and adrenaline. But Esmé didn't flinch. She moved like she'd done this dance before, and she had. Not here, not with these men, but back in Louisiana, when she'd stood her ground against a man who thought ownership came with a ring. The last rider, scar-faced and mean-eyed, wheeled his horse and came charging straight at her. Silas saw him first and yelled, "Esmé!" But she was already moving. Her boot found the edge of a hay bale, and she launched herself up and over, landing in a crouch behind the old wagon wheel leaned against the barn. As the rider passed, she stood and fired once, clean and true. The bullet struck his rifle, snapping the stock and knocking it clean from his hands. He tried to draw his pistol, but Cashin was there now, revolver raised, and the rider froze. "Drop it," Cashin said, his voice low and steady. "Ain't no bounty worth dying today." The man hesitated, then tossed his iron in the dirt. Silas marched over, gun still raised, and kicked the man's weapon farther. "Who sent you?" he growled. The rider spat blood and said nothing. Cashin stepped closer. "Was it Lambert?" The man's lip curled. "Don't matter. He's paying good, and there's more coming. Whole damn posse's 2 days behind. You think you scared me off? You're just warming up the fire." Silas pistol whipped him then. Not hard, just enough to silence the grin. "He'll keep till the sheriff gets here." Esmé exhaled, slow. The fight was over for now. But her hands were still shaking, and her mind was already running ahead, calculating. Lambert had found her again. That meant no more peace. No more long rides and quiet mornings. The past was here, wearing spurs. Later, back at her small cabin behind the livery, she poured 3 cups of rye from an old bottle that had seen better days. They sat at her table, Esmé, Silas, and Cashin, silent, the room thick with heat and questions. "Why didn't you run?" Silas asked. Esmé looked at him, eyes steady. "Because I'm tired of running. I got a life here. Built it with my own 2 hands." Cashin nodded. "Then we help you keep it." Silas raised a brow. "You sure about that, Drake? Helping her might put a price on your back." Cashin grinned. "What's one more, Kate?" Esmé watched them both, one steady as stone, the other quick as lightning, and for the first time, she realized something dangerous. These men weren't here to claim her. They were here to stand beside her. She sipped her drink, leaned back, and said, "Then I reckon we better make some plans. 'Cause Lambert's not the patient type. And when he comes, he'll bring hell with him." And somewhere out on the prairie, where the wind swept dry and hot across the scrub, a rider galloped hard toward Mercy Hill, dust curling like a serpent behind him. He carried orders in his coat and death in his eyes. By the time the sun dipped low, Mercy Hill was bracing for trouble. Sheriff Marston, grizzled and half-drunk most days, had locked up the bounty hunter Cashin and Silas caught, but he didn't much like the look of what was coming. "Man like Lambert don't send a message unless the reply's already too late," he muttered, nursing a busted tooth and a warm bottle. Esmé stood in the doorway of her livery, watching the horizon burn gold and blood orange. She tied her hair back tight, pinned her father's old cavalry badge to her vest, and strapped on a fresh belt of cartridges. She looked like a woman ready for war, and maybe she was. Cashin sat on a crate nearby, cleaning his revolver with calm hands. "You sure you don't want to ride out?" he asked without looking up. Esmé didn't answer right off. She was watching a hawk circle over the far ridge. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and even. "If I leave now, he wins. Again." I didn't burn Lambert's house just for the smoke. Silas approached from the stable, his own rifle slung across his shoulder, a box of ammunition under one arm. We could set traps along the dry creek. Use the terrain. Make him come to us. Cashin nodded. Ain't a bad plan. That bottleneck narrows the trail. Only 2, maybe 3 horses can pass at once. Esmé turned to them both. Then we make that past their grave. That night, while the townsfolk locked their doors and whispered prayers, the trio rode out under a sliver of moonlight. Mercy Hill slept, but its fate was being carved in the dirt by hands who'd already bled too much. They set the traps quiet and careful, tripwires tied to shotgun triggers, broken glass buried shallow where hooves might fall, and a few cans of kerosene placed where a spark could turn night to hellfire. When they returned to town, Esmé stopped at her mother's grave behind the chapel. She didn't speak long, just knelt down and whispered, "You always said I'd burn too hot for this world. I reckon we'll find out come morning." Back at her cabin, she lit a single lantern and pulled a folded letter from a cedar box. The paper was worn, the ink nearly faded. "Esmé, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let him win. Don't let him take your light. Love, Joseph." Her brother's last words. She folded the paper again, slipped it into her coat. Come dawn, the riders appeared. 7 of them. Men hired for their silence and their steel. At the front rode Lambert himself, clean-shaven, coat-pressed, eyes like wet coal. He dismounted just outside town, lit a cigar and smiled. "Bring me the girl," he said. Inside Mercy Hill's livery, Esmé loaded her rifle and glanced at the 2 men beside her, one worn by war, the other by regret. "She's not a girl," Silas muttered. Cashin smiled grimly. "She's the reckoning." And then the guns began to roar. Lambert's men came in like thunder, fast, mean, certain. They thought Mercy Hill was soft. They thought the woman they hunted was still scared. They were wrong. The first rider tripped a wire laid across the Dry Creek bend, and the blast sent him clean out of the saddle. His horse screamed and bolted. The second man went down in a tangle of glass and curses, his hand torn open where he tried to shield his face. From the livery's hayloft, Cashin fired twice, dropping a third outlaw before the man could even draw. His eyes were cold, focused. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about keeping a promise he hadn't even known he meant to make. Silas was crouched behind a stack of crates, picking targets with deliberate care. 1 bullet, 1 body, his breathing steady, like the rifle was part of his lungs. The 7th man, a brute with a black bandana and a shotgun, broke for cover behind the blacksmith's forge. Esmé. She didn't wait. She charged out from the shadows like fire on legs, her pistol roaring. She shot the 6th man square in the leg, dropped to one knee, and drove her boot into his jaw when he reached for her. She didn't look back, didn't blink. Lambert stood in the middle of it all, untouched. He watched the chaos with a cold sneer, arms crossed like he was witnessing a bad play. "You always were dramatic, Esmé," he called. "Burning my house down. Killing your own future. You could have lived like a queen." She didn't answer, just raised her revolver. Lambert didn't flinch. "You think I didn't prepare for this? Think I came without a backup?" That's when a door creaked open behind them, Marston's jail. The bounty hunter, the one they locked up, stepped out with a rifle in hand and a smirk on his face. "I told y'all," he drawled. "He don't send warnings." Cashin turned, his gun rising, but he was too slow. The bounty hunter aimed straight at Esmé. Then a shot rang out. Not from Cashin, not from Silas, from behind the general store, where old Miss Althea, storekeeper, widow, and steady hand with the Sharps .50, had taken up watch. The bullet caught the turncoat square in the chest, dropping him like a sack of flour. "I stocked your biscuits for 12 years, she muttered. "Ain't letting you shoot the one decent soul this town's got." Lambert snarled, pulled his pistol, but Esmé was already moving. She dove, rolled, and fired from the ground. The bullet struck Lambert's hand, the gun skittering into the dust. He stumbled back, clutching his wrist, blood running down his cuff. "You're going to regret that," he hissed. "No," she said, rising. "I already regretted not doing it sooner." Lambert stared at her. "Go ahead. Shoot me. You won't. Esmé stepped forward, gun still raised. I ain't shooting you. But you are gonna hang. And you're gonna do it knowing a woman brought you down. Silas cuffed him. Cashin kept watch. By the time the dust settled, 4 men were dead. 2 more fled. Lambert sat in the jail, hands bound, eyes smoldering with hate. But he was beat. That much was clear. Mercy Hill stood quiet and whole. And for the first time in years, so did Esmé. The town was quiet after. The kind of quiet that only follows thunder. The kind where the air still hums with what just passed, and the earth ain't quite sure if it's done trembling. Esmé stood alone in the livery yard, the revolver still warm in her hand, her heart trying to decide if it should feel proud or broken. Lambert was behind bars. The dust was settling, but the look in her eyes said the storm inside her hadn't passed. Cashin stepped up beside her, hat in hand. You all right? She didn't answer right off. Just looked down at the gun, then at her fingers. I never wanted to be this kind of woman. Silas came up on her other side. What kind's that? The kind that has to fight for everything, even peace. Cashin chuckled low. Ain't no shame in that. Peace don't come easy for folks who earn it. She looked at him, then at Silas. 2 men, so different, yet both steady in their way. One smiled through fire. The other stood in it like stone. You boys risked your lives for me, she said finally. Why? Cashin gave that crooked grin. Well, some say I've got a weakness for strong women with faster guns than sense. Silas said nothing, just looked her in the eye and said, because it was right. And that, right there, was the line between him. Later that day, with the jail locked up and Lambert glaring through the bars, Esmé stood at the front steps of the livery and looked out at the street. Mercy Hill had taken her in, helped her stand again. But it wasn't just the town, it was the people. And now, one question loomed heavy over her like storm clouds over the mesa. Who would she walk beside? Cashin was oil on water, sharp, fast, clever. He made her laugh when she forgot how. But his heart was a gambler's heart, deep but always restless. Silas was the quiet hum of thunder, slow to speak, slower to leave. His heart was a shelter, not a thrill. That evening, she met them both by the well. No one else around. Just 3 souls under the summer dusk. I've got a choice to make, she said, and I've never been one to dance around it. Cashin raised a brow, smirking faintly. Reckon I'm about to lose a coin toss. Esmé shook her head. This ain't a game. And it ain't about who won the fight. It's about who's willing to stay even when there ain't nothing to fight. Silas met her gaze, silent. Cashin's smile faded. I get it. I do. He stepped forward, took her hand gently, kissed her knuckles like a gentleman from another age. If you ever change your mind, just whistle. I'll hear it. Then he turned, mounted up, and rode out. Didn't look back. Esmé turned to Silas. You still gonna be here? She asked. He gave the smallest nod. I was never leaving. And for the first time since her world burned down, Esmé felt something anchor her deep in the soil. A week passed. Mercy Hill settled back into its dusty rhythm, like a saloon piano after the brawl's done and the chairs are upright again. But there was a hush to the streets now, a respect that hadn't been there before. Folks nodded to Esmé when she passed. The whispers stopped. Even Sheriff Marston started calling her Miss Delaroa like he should have from the start. Silas stayed close, but not suffocating. He helped at the livery when she'd let him, hauled feed, shod horses, and said little. But every evening, he'd lean against the hitching post with a tin cup in hand, just keeping her company as the sun dipped behind the hills. One night, Esmé found herself sitting on her porch, fingers absently tracing the rim of her cup, watching the stars come out like old friends. She looked at Silas and said, You ever wonder what comes after peace? He glanced up, thoughtful. Most men don't get to ask that. We're too busy praying for it. She chuckled soft. I ain't never lived past the fight. Don't know if I'll recognize what comes next. Maybe you don't need to, he said. Maybe you just build it, brick by brick, day by day. That night she slept with her windows open, for the first time in years. But peace, like all things, is never owed. It's earned, then tested. It was early morning when the letter arrived, delivered by a rider with a black saddle and no words. The envelope bore no return mark, just her name. Inside, a single piece of parchment. You think this is done, girl? You only cut one head from the serpent. Others still remember. And we still burn for what you did. No signature. No location. But she knew. The Bellamy name had weight in places where the law didn't ride, and revenge was thicker than kin. She folded the letter without a word and went to find Silas. When she handed it to him, his jaw tightened, but he didn't curse or pace. He just said, "We stay ready." "No," Esmé said. "We go to them." Silas blinked. "You sure?" "I'm done waiting to be hunted," she said. "It's time they remembered who started the fire." By sundown, they'd packed light, rifles, ammo, travel biscuits, and the old map Esmé kept behind her saddle. They'd ride east at first light, toward the bayous and backwoods of Louisiana, toward her ghosts. As they saddled up, Silas looked over and asked, "You certain Cashin's not riding with us?" She smiled, but it was a sad one. Cashin's a firework. Bright, wild, and gone before you catch it. You're the hearth. And that was all that needed saying. Behind them, Mercy Hill faded into the night, but ahead lay the place where her story started, where it burned, and where it would end, one way or another. The ride east was long and mean. The land changed beneath their hooves, dry plains giving way to thickets, then to the slow, thick breath of the Louisiana bayou. It was a land that remembered. The trees here didn't whisper, they watched. The air hung heavy with heat and secrets, and the smell of wet moss stuck to a rider's skin like guilt. Silas rode ahead most days, silent and sure, but Esmé led them through the worst of it. She knew these woods, knew which paths sank beneath you, and which ones held firm. They reached the outskirts of Bayou Morne on the fourth morning, a half-forgotten place that didn't welcome strangers. The houses here were built on stilts, the shutters always closed, the water below black and still. Esmé tied her horse outside the only chapel still standing, her jaw set like stone. "They buried my brother back there," she said, nodding toward the weeds beyond the cemetery fence. No marker, just a hole. The preacher didn't even say a name. Silas took his hat off, nodded once. Then maybe it's time someone did. They stood there in silence a while. Then Esmé said, "There's a house we gotta visit. White one, porch all around, with 3 bloodstains, still dark on the floorboards. Lambert's older brother lives there. Runs the men now. Calls himself Judge Bellamy." Silas's brow furrowed. "A judge? Only in name," she said. "He decides who lives and who don't. No gavel. Just gold and guns." They approached the Bellamy estate just before dusk. The mansion stood at the center of the waterline like a rotting tooth. Too grand for the place it sat. Too proud for its filth. The porch was lit with lanterns, and 3 men stood watch, rifles at their sides. Esmé didn't blink. She stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, and called, "I ain't here to hide. Tell your boss Esmé Bellamy's come home." That name still had weight. The guards flinched. One of them ran inside. A minute passed. Then 2. The door creaked open, and a tall man in a linen vest and gold watch chain stepped onto the porch. Hair gone gray, eyes cold as the swamp. "Well now," he drawled. "Didn't think I'd see the girl again." "Woman," Esmé corrected. "And I'm here for answers." "Answers?" He chuckled, slow and sharp. "You lit the match, girl. What's left to ask?" Silas stepped forward, rifle low but loaded. "Maybe we're here for the truth. Maybe we're here to end what you started." Judge Bellamy's smile faded. "You're not welcome here." "Wasn't welcome the first time either," Esmé said. "Didn't stop me then. Ain't stopping me now." The standoff stretched like a drawn breath. Then Judge Bellamy nodded once to his men. "Bring her inside," he said. "Let's see if the past can sit at the table without throwing dishes." As they walked through that creaking door, Esmé's hand brushed her coat pocket, where her brother's letter still rested, soft from years of carry-in, sharp as ever. This was the house where everything fell apart, and now it was where she'd finish it. The Bellamy parlor hadn't changed. Same velvet drapes, Same dusty chandelier that never quite caught the light right. Same air, thick with tobacco, old money, and scent that smelled of perfume and gunpowder. Esmé stood across from Judge Bellamy, her hands steady despite the weight in her chest. Silas flanked her, calm but alert, eyes sharp on the three armed men behind them. This wasn't a visit. It was a trial, and only one side would leave clean. "You come for blood?" Judge Bellamy asked, leaning back in his chair like he had all the cards. "No," Esmé said. "I came for the truth." He laughed, the sound dry as swamp dust. "And what truth you think you're owed?" Esmé stepped forward, pulled a folded paper from her coat, and laid it on the table. Her brother's letter. She didn't speak. Just let it sit there between them like a drawn pistol. Bellamy glanced down, eyes narrowing. He didn't pick it up. "You think that changes anything?" he sneered. "The boy stole from me. He riled up the workers, turned them against me. He wanted fair pay," Esmé said, voice low. "He wanted you to stop beating the ones who spoke out. He got what happens to men who don't know their place." Silas moved before he even knew he'd moved. His fist cracked across the judge's jaw, sent him tumbling out of that high-backed chair like a sack of flour. The guard stepped forward, but Esmé had already drawn her pistol. "Don't," she said, her voice flat. The room froze. Judge Bellamy lay on the floor, blood on his lip, his pride shattered. "You think you can walk out of here alive?" Esmé aimed square at his chest. "No, I plan to ride out." He glared at her. "Then shoot. Prove you're just like me." She didn't. Instead, she pulled the hammer back, just enough for it to click. "I'm not like you," she said. "I ain't here for vengeance. I'm here to end it." She stepped back, motioned to Silas. "Let's go." They walked out slow. Calm. The guards didn't follow. Outside, the air was thick with the hum of night creatures and the buzz of justice long denied. As they mounted up, Esmé looked back once, just long enough to see Judge Bellamy rise from the floor, stunned and silent, the truth still echoing in that rotted house. They rode west again, toward open land, away from the ghosts. A month later, back in Mercy Hill, the sun hung low and wide, gold as coin. Esmé stood by the livery fence, watching the horses graze. Silas came up behind her, handed her a letter. She opened it slow. Inside, no hard feelings. "You made the right choice. Give him hell. See." She smiled, folded it carefully. "You still think about him?" Silas asked. "Sometimes," she said, "but I think about you more." He nodded, quiet and steady. They didn't need words after that. Just the wind, the sky, and the sound of a town where a woman's name was no longer a secret, but a legend.